Yet again, I found myself reading a comment. This one greatly concerned me. Chipset wrote, "Pepsi Zero is diabolical." Immediately, I was shocked and horrified. I was rapidly typing a response, paragraph after paragraph, page after page. I typed and I typed. And then it struck me. Not even Chipset will read this reply. So I quickly highlighted and deleted what I wrote, and instead said that I will make a video on this topic. So first, we must explore the history of the word itself. In the ancient Greek world, the word started as diabolos. It literally meant to throw across, which evolved into the definition of a slanderer or accuser, because a slanderer throws false charges at someone. Later in the ecclesiastical Greek and late Latin world, early Christian writers used diabolos to translate the Hebrew word Satan, which also means accuser. This is when the word officially shifted from meaning a human slanderer to meaning the devil. It gained the adjective form, diabolicus, and as we move through the centuries, in Old French, the 13th century, the Latin term evolved into the French diabolique, and in Middle English, the 14th or 15th century, English borrowed the word from French and Latin, giving us diabolic, and eventually added the English suffix "al" to create diabolical, meaning pertaining to or befitting the devil. Now, based on this, we could suggest that the commenter is the one that is diabolical for slandering Pepsi Zero. But how do we know it's slander at all? We must not reach for our emotions, our love of Pepsi, but we must investigate what it is to be pertaining to the devil. And in order to do that, we need to know what the devil is. Augustine of Hippo, writing in the 4th and 5th centuries, gave us what would become the dominant Christian account of evil. He called it the privation of good. The argument is straightforward. God, being perfect, created all things that exist. All things that exist, insofar as they exist at all, participate in goodness. Evil, therefore, cannot be a substance. It can't be a force, a presence, a thing with positive ontological content. Evil is an absence, a lack, a withdrawal of good from something that was previously more complete. Augustine writes in the Enchiridion that evil has no nature of its own. What we call evil is simply the privation of good. The devil, on this account, is not a dark being opposing a light being. The devil is the being most characterized by lack, by privation, by the gradual or catastrophic removal of good from what God made full. And so we return to the can. Pepsi Zero. Let's be more precise and read the label with the seriousness it deserves. Pepsi. Zero sugar. 0 calories. 0 nutritional content. What we have before us is a product defined entirely and in its own words by what it lacks. It does not say what it is. It says what it is not. It has no positive nutritional nature. It is, by its own admission, a privation. And if Augustine is correct that evil is privation, the absence of good, the withdrawal of fullness from what should be full, then we're forced to conclude that Pepsi Zero is not merely diabolical in the casual sense the commenter intended. It is diabolical in the most precise theological sense available to us. It is structured at the level of its own ingredients list as evil itself. However, Augustine's framework creates a problem. privation in his account is never freestanding. Darkness is not a thing. It's the absence of light. Corruption is not a thing. It's the degradation of something that was good. Evil is always parasitic. It requires a host. It requires something full and good from which it can be the withdrawal. So we must ask, what is Pepsi Zero the privation of? And the answer is uncomfortable. It's the privation of Pepsi. Regular Pepsi. Full sugar, full calorie, fully present Pepsi. Augustine's framework, applied consistently, commits us to the position that regular Pepsi is the good. And so Chipset may have a case. By Augustine's account, the charge of diabolism is not without merit, but I'm not satisfied, because Augustine is not the only thinker who's stared into a void and drawn conclusions about what lives there. And also, on a personal note, I just don't find it convincing to say that regular Pepsi is the good. But that's, merely my opinion. So, Muhyiddin ibn Arabi, the 13th century Andalusian mystic and theologian that, we've referenced several times on this channel, gives us a very different account of what it means to be characterized by zero. At the summit of his metaphysics sits what he calls the ahadiyya, the absolute divine unity. God in his innermost reality, prior to all names, prior to all attributes, prior to all self-disclosure. And this God is not describable. He can't be said to be good or powerful or present, because all of those are predications, and predication already introduces multiplicity into what is absolutely one. The ahadiyya is, in this sense, without positive content. It's not the privation of something greater, it simply is. Prior to all the ways of being anything in particular. And then there is the tajalli, the self-disclosure, the moment at which the divine ground pours itself into creation, into names, into attributes, into the world of things that can be pointed at and described and purchased at a gas station. But the tajalli does not only reveal. Ibn Arabi is insistent in this. The very act of self-disclosure is simultaneously an act of concealment. God veils himself through the veil of his own appearance. The can sits on the shelf. It's fully present. It is also at the same moment hiding everything essential about itself behind the fact of its own visibility. Because the name on the can never held. This same liquid was once called Pepsi Max. Maximum. The superlative of presence, of fullness, of being at the limit. Internationally, it remains Pepsi Max today. Domestically, it became zero. Antonyms. The same substance, simultaneously the most and the nothing. The veil keeps changing. The thing behind the veil does not. Nicholas of Cusa, the 15th century German theologian, sent a painting to the monks of Tegernsee. Hope I said that right. The painting depicted a face whose eyes followed every viewer simultaneously, regardless of where a monk stood in the room, regardless of how many monks stood there at once. The eyes met each of them fully, completely, without division. Cusa used this to describe the nature of divine vision. God sees every particular perspective at once while remaining beyond any single perspective. The image gives itself entirely to each viewer, and yet no viewer exhausts what the image is. Every monk receives the gaze completely. No monk receives everything. The can of Pepsi Zero is that painting. It gives itself to you completely every time you open it. And what you receive depends entirely on who you are. Ibn Arabi calls this istidad, receptive preparedness. The capacity of the vessel determines what it receives from the divine disclosure. The tajalli is constant. The zero is always giving you everything it has. But what pours into you when you drink it is conditioned by the shape of your own interiority, by your history, by what your palate has been formed to expect. The person who has known only full sugar raises the can and receives absence, privation, something that promised sweetness and delivered a stranger. They're not wrong about their experience. Their vessel was shaped by regular Pepsi, and so the zero poured into it and registered as lack. But the vessel can change. Your taste changes. What once seemed wrong begins to seem sufficient, then complete, then exactly what it is, and nothing less. The zero hasn't changed. The can hasn't changed. You've changed. And what the tajalli discloses to you has changed with you. Rumi, in the opening lines of the Masnavi, gives us the reed flute crying from separation. Cut from the reed bed, it cries. And the cry is the music. And the music is the longing. And the longing is itself the form that love takes in a creature who has not yet recognized what it's reaching toward. The full sugar drinker who recoils from Pepsi Zero is the reed. The sense of privation, of wrongness, of diabolism, that's the cry. And in Rumi's understanding, the cry is not the opposite of love, it's love's beginning. It's the first movement toward the thing you haven't yet learned to receive. Chipset called Pepsi Zero diabolical. They were crying from the reed bed. They simply didn't know yet that the cry was the song. And so Pepsi Zero is not the privation of Pepsi. Pepsi is the tajalli of Pepsi Zero. The full, sugared, caloric can is the self-disclosure of something that was always already beneath it, nameless and without attribute. The zero is the ground. The Pepsi is the world. Augustine had the dependency relation exactly backwards. But perhaps the theological doesn't move you. Perhaps Ibn Arabi and Rumi and Nicholas of Cusa feel too distant, too abstract, too removed from the immediate fact of the can in your hand. Well, very well, we can approach this from another direction entirely. Jean Baudrillard, the 20th century French theorist, gave us the concept of the simulacrum, a copy with no original, a sign that refers not to a real thing, but to the absence of that thing, and which, in referring to nothing, becomes more real than the real. Baudrillard watched Disneyland and saw not a fantasy, but a machine for making America feel real by comparison. He watched television and saw not representation, but replacement. And if he had watched you or I open a Pepsi Zero, he would have seen something that may have disturbed him. Pepsi Zero is not a reduced Pepsi. It's not Pepsi with something taken out. It's a simulation of cola that refers to no original cola substance. And the sign hasn't even been stable. This same liquid was once called Pepsi Max, Maximum, and then Pepsi Zero, without the formula changing beneath either name. The sign flipped from the superlative of presence to the superlative of absence, while the referent remained identical and indifferent. Max meant nothing. Zero means nothing. Neither was a description of the liquid. They were positions taken in a market, projected onto a substance that was never consulted. The sweetness arrives, and it is real sweetness. You can't deny the sweetness. But it is sweetness produced by something that is not sugar. And a drink that contains no calories, that transfers nothing, that nourishes nothing. You've received the complete experience of refreshment with no refreshment behind it. The satisfaction is total. The satisfaction is also, in the strictest sense, groundless. There is no there. You've been given the map with no territory underneath it. The map has already redrawn itself once, and you enjoyed it, and you'll open another one. For Baudrillard, this is not innocent. The simulacrum doesn't deceive you about reality. It's worse than that. It replaces reality so completely that the question of deception no longer applies. You can't call Pepsi Zero a lie because there was no truth it's hiding. The sugar was never coming. There was never going to be sugar. The experience was always going to be exactly this: complete, satisfying, and empty of everything that completion and satisfaction are supposed to rest on. If anything, in a gas station is capable of pertaining to the devil in a modern sense, Baudrillard has just made the case that it's this. And yet, Hannah Arendt, writing in the aftermath of the Nuremberg trials, gave us a different account of what evil actually looks like, up close. She called it the banality of evil. Evil is not grand. It's not metaphysically charged. It's not the dramatic withdrawal of divine goodness from a corrupted vessel. Evil is thoughtlessness. It's the absence of reflection. It's a man pushing paper who never once stopped to think about what the paper meant. The most diabolical thing for Arendt is not the abyss. It's the refusal to look into any abyss at all. Pepsi Zero has produced this essay. It's generated Etymology, Augustine, Ibn Arabi, Rumi, Nicholas of Cusa, Baudrillard, Arendt, and we're not finished yet. It's made you think. It made me think. It made me, a man on the internet, type paragraphs into a comment section at an hour I'm not going to disclose. By Arendt's account, the most diabolical thing a beverage could do is produce thoughtlessness. And Pepsi Zero has done the precise opposite. It is the single most philosophically generative drink ever placed on a shelf. It will not stop making you think. But prior to me doing all this thinking, prior to the present moment, prior to you thinking on Pepsi Zero as you watch this, did it produce thoughtlessness? Was Pepsi Zero, prior to now, evil? Since its creation, when the can was first raised and already before the very first sip, something was happening. Husserl called this pretension. The way consciousness is never a pure present moment, but is always reaching toward what it anticipates. You've drunk cola before. Your body knows what's coming, or believes it does. The sweetness is already expected. The experience has already begun before the liquid arrives. And then it arrives. Sweetness, real, present, undeniable. Your thirst resolves. The experience of satisfaction occurs fully, and yet nothing has been transferred. 0 sugar, 0 calories, 0 nutritional content. You've received the form of nourishment without its substance. The expectation was met and not met simultaneously. Something arrived that was not quite what was anticipated, and yet was not wrong, was not absent, was not nothing. This is not thoughtlessness. Thoughtlessness is frictionless. Thoughtlessness is the experience that goes exactly as predicted, that meets every expectation so completely that consciousness never has cause to pause, to orient, to notice itself drinking at all. Pepsi Zero doesn't do this. There's something in the structure of the experience, not confusion, not disappointment, not the recoil of the full sugar drinker encountering the wrong thing, but a slight, irreducible presence to the act. A moment in which you are, however briefly, there, attending, oriented toward the experience rather than simply passing through it. You didn't think about Ibn Arabi. You didn't think about Augustine. You didn't think about anything at all. But you weren't thoughtless. The can returned your attention to itself, quietly, without demanding anything. The way Cusa's painting meets every monk's eyes without asking to be looked at. Pepsi Zero wasn't evil prior to now. It was never evil. It was waiting. And so now we return to the comment Chipset wrote, that Pepsi Zero is diabolical. We've taken this seriously. We've done the work that the claim demands. We consulted Augustine, Ibn Arabi, Rumi, Nicholas of Cusa, Baudrillard, Arendt, and Husserl. We've examined the etymology, the ingredients list, the structure of the experience itself. We've been thorough. We've been rigorous. And we have been, I think, fair. And the verdict is as follows. By Augustine's account, Pepsi Zero is structured as privation. This is true. But Augustine's framework, applied consistently, commits us to the position that regular Pepsi is the good. And neither of us is prepared to accept that as the final word on the matter. Augustine is insufficient. By Baudrillard's account, Pepsi Zero's a simulacrum, a satisfaction with nothing behind it. This is also true. But Baudrillard mistakes the groundlessness of the experience for its condemnation. He sees the map without territory and calls it sinister. He doesn't consider that perhaps the territory was always the wrong thing to want. By Ibn Arabi's account, the drink, whether we call it maximum or nothing, is the ahadiyya, the divine ground prior to all names. The Pepsi is the tajalli. What you receive when you drink it is conditioned by the shape of your own istidad, your receptive preparedness, and not by any deficiency in the can. The can's always giving everything it has. By Arendt's account, Pepsi Zero produces the opposite of thoughtlessness. This essay's evidence. You watching this is evidence. The pause, that slight, irreducible moment of presence in the act of drinking itself is evidence. Pepsi Zero does not befit the devil. It befits the examined life. And by Nicholas of Cusa's account, the can meets every viewer exactly where they are. It gives itself completely to whoever opens it. It doesn't withhold. It doesn't discriminate. It asks only that you bring whatever istidad you have and let the rest follow. Chipset, I've investigated your claim with the full weight of the Western and Islamic philosophical traditions. I've been fair to your position. I've steel-manned it with Augustine and Baudrillard. I've given it every opportunity to hold. It doesn't hold. Pepsi Zero is not diabolical. Pepsi Zero is, by the most rigorous standards available to us, the closest a physical object has ever come to the unmanifest divine ground of being, condescending to appear on a shelf so that we might have a small encounter with the absolute and call it a beverage. I'll be drinking another one right now.
Be sociable, look smart, keep up to date with Pepsi, drink light, refreshing Pepsi.